Victoria, welcome back. It's Business Morning here on Channels Television. A lot has been said about the disparity between Nigeria's macro and microeconomic situation. And while the government is very happy with the status of the macroeconomy, well, a lot seems to be yet to be done when it comes to micro, and so we ask, what's the missing link once again? But let's look at the picture of both Nigeria's macro and micro at this time. So we start with the GDP. We saw that the GDP for the first quarter of 2026 at 3.89% year on year. And yet, in spite of this big growth, a lot of people would describe it, SMEs continue to face high operating costs and financing constraints. So then what's the essence of the growth? Headline inflation, well, that has remained elevated, so it's not even good even from the macro part. And of course, that translates to more expensive food, transport, housing, and energy. And of course, more threats to the purchasing power of businesses and households. Monetary policy remains restrictive. As we know, interest rate is still very high, cost of fund is high, and businesses are feeling its high borrowing cost, making credit expensive. And further, we see improved naira stability. We've seen, at least in the official market, we've seen the naira below 1,400 for many months now, and yet imported inputs remain vulnerable to exchange rate movements. That's the reality. Oil production is still the major contributor to government revenue, and yet fuel is still very expensive. We have higher, yesterday we're celebrating higher production of crude by Nigeria, but of course we now pay even more for petrol, even though we've seen a little bit of reduction in between. Cost of logistics is still very high. Input costs is affecting operating margins as expected. Reforms are improving some macro imbalances, but the same reforms seem to be creating substantial adjustment costs to households. The NGX, the local boss, has been doing well, even though we see seasons of pullback, which is a natural thing for any progressive market. Capital inflow shows that investors are more confident about Nigeria, but many Nigerians are not directly benefiting from this increase in financial asset prices. There's improved FX availability. Reserves, we've seen our reserve hit $50 billion, and yet access to affordable credit is still far away from the average Nigerian. Perhaps we need to look for the missing link. The director of Quartus Economics, Mr. David Adeoye, is in the studio to help us link the micro and macro. Mr. Adeoye, good to have you in the studio. So what are we missing? Or is it just a natural thing? You know, they say in every policy there's the lag.
Yeah.
Is it the lag? Should we not be in a hurry?
There is the lag. But it's also important that we understand the context of where we were coming from, what has happened, and what lies ahead of us. On matters like this, I like to use a metaphor of a patient who had to undergo a surgery. You know that, one, if you don't like to see blood, you cannot be a surgeon. That's number one. Number two is the surgeon also needs a mix of courage and precision to act. So the surgeon takes the patient, in this case the Nigerian economy, into the theater, surrounded by... In
this case, the surgeon is President Tinubu.
Yes. The buck stops at his table.
Yes, it does.
Yes. So the surgeon goes in for the surgery. The focus of the surgeon is not always on the moment, on the comfort of the patient during the operating session. The focus of the surgeon, first, survival, the patient must survive. Two, the patient must have a very strong prospect of quick recovery. And you find that there's what we call post-surgery care. So all of that has to happen. Now coming to the matter, so we need to understand where was this patient before the surgery became necessary. Is the surgeon to blame for the pains, or did the patient have debilitating conditions that simply have to be corrected? In that case, a so-called merciful or compassionate surgeon may not get that job done. Now, when you see a surgeon come out of the theater and you see sigh of relief on his face, he's not saying the patient is already comfortable, but he can see the future of that patient, that the biggest threat has been removed. And now the patient can start a journey of recovery. So I start with that metaphor. That was what Nigeria went through because we've had discussions around this economy for too long. And when we look at the way our population was growing, we know that there are issues that we simply have to address. Population was growing at multiple of production growth. That was a problem. It's just like saying the population of a community keeps growing while the harvest from their farms remains stagnant. Poverty was going to increase, with or without a corrective surgery. But if that poverty is going to slow down at certain points, there must first be a corrective surgery. Why are people not going to the farms? Why is production not rising? So all of those were addressed. And if I can refer to the data, I look at different data sets between May 2023 and mid 2026. Headline inflation was 22.2 in 2023 May. Today is 15.9%. In fact, it actually at some point peaked at 34.8% inflation. That was bad news for any economy. Now, external reserves as at that time was $3.9 billion. Today is $51.9 billion. Our balance of payments was in the negative, $3.34 billion dollars. Today is in the positive, $2.38 billion. Our exchange rate, yes. In fact, the problem with the exchange rate at that time was not even the level. Was one, the multiple windows, and two, the range between the official and the parallel market. And we had exchange rate between 463 naira on the official market to $1 and 700 naira in the parallel market. That was killing. Which investor wants to come in? And without investment, we can't grow production. Without production growth, we cannot provide jobs. Without jobs, we cannot reduce poverty. Now, when we look at those factors, was today we have exchange rates at between 1,360 and 1,400. The difference is just 40 naira, and we have a single market, as it were. When we look at our debt to GDP ratio, it was 38% in 2023.
So it was a much needed surgery.
It was a much needed surgery.
So surgery is over. Where are we now?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So surgery is over. Now, at the end of a surgery, after post-surgery, some things need to happen. There is the responsibility of the medical team. There is the responsibility of the patient.
So first of all, this is post-surgery.
Yeah, post-surgery, 3 years post-surgery.
So the difference between the micro, or the disparity between the micro and macro, is part of the discomfort that comes with the surgery, right?
Well, partly because some things will take time to recover.
So that's the pain now. That's the pain.
Yes, so part of it is pains, but those pains will not last forever.
Okay.
So it's also good for us to check, to ask certain questions. What has improved? So yes, the headline.
I think you noted those things that have improved.
Exactly. So you have the headline numbers. But look like macro.
Because the average Nigerian doesn't feel this.
Well, I think that's something we need to look at closely.
Okay.
And ask ourselves, which part does the average Nigerian feel, and which part is yet to be felt, and why? Because at each point in time, even doctors, after a surgery, they examine the patient, what is meant to be improving that has not improved, what is taking longer to show up. So for example, when we look at jobs or prosperity, we know that we all face this cost of living crisis. But when you look at the income or earnings of companies, it has gone up. One thing most people will not tell you, even your neighbors, some of your friends, nobody picks a trumpet to say, my salary has increased by 25%. But
operating cost has also gone up.
Yes, revenues went up, operating cost went up, but earnings, the difference between the revenues and the cost has also gone up. So the margin for a number of companies have expanded, and that's always good news. Investors want revenue growth, and they also want positive margins on that growth. So I will say yes, we've had that, but it's also good for us to look at a few items. So let's ask ourselves this: what is the distribution of participation in productive activity? And productive activity, I'm not just loosely saying hard work or work. How productive are we as an economy? Now, an economy that has been subsidized for at least 4 to 5 decades is not going to suddenly change its dynamics. For example, we keep finding, there is a lot of evidence that the public sector in a number of places is bloated at different levels, that you have more people than you need. The truth is, if you must cut down, that increases the pains. But with the size of people you may have on the payroll, there's a limit on how much you can pay. But it still comes down to productivity. How productive is the economy? Now, we've had an economy where services account for more than half of our GDP at certain points in time. And we should be asking, so where is the consumption coming from? Domestic production, imports. So to the extent that we still import a lot of what we consume, we have problems there. So until production rises, and let me quickly reference a particular point. Now, talking of time lag, interest rate and prices will usually take 6 to 18 months to adjust.
So is that the lag?
Yes, that's the expected lag.
Okay.
But let's not forget that when it comes to prices, the global economy had a shock earlier this year.
Still has the shock.
Yes, we are still in that shock. Exactly. So the US-Israel-Iran conflict is what pushed up inflation back. Otherwise, Nigeria's inflation was under control. Now, from exchange rate to investment decision takes 12 to 36 months on a good day, and we are seeing that. So investments are coming back. Let me just use a single.
Give us the time lag for the macro translation.
That's what
we really want.
So I'm going to show you that.
Okay, because there are conversation as to, is it leakages in the public sector especially that's causing the increased disparity, or is it the intervention programs, that the social interventions program that we see the government being more intentional about now?
Yeah.
Is that what is going to fix this gap?
No. What's going to fix the gap is production. And there is a clear link. So we start from reforms, we move to a place where the currency is stable and investments begin to come in. Now it's an 8-step process. You get to a point where capital begins to flow into the economy. That capital must find its way into factories, into farms, into different productive activities. It's after that we can begin to see the effects, or the expanded effects or elevated effects on household income.
So do you see us on that path?
We are on that.
What are the signs?
We are at the point where capital inflows has increased. That's always a good one. When capital inflows into an economy increase or rises, first you see construction starting. Construction, and I'm not just talking of government mega projects, which will have its own spillover effect, positive, but we also have a case where factories start getting constructed. Post-construction, that factories will start operations. Private sector, yes. And one mistake we shouldn't make is expecting that Nigeria is still a welfare state. No. That has effectively ended. Yet the government is putting... Is it
the removal of subsidy that ended that?
Yes, removal of the distortion.
We still have electricity subsidy.
Subsidy, but if you look at it, the electricity sector is also still not performing as it ought to. So when I say Nigeria is no longer a welfare state, the question is, were we even adequately resourced to be a welfare state? We operated as a welfare state on loans, as it were. Our welfare tendencies or our welfare programs, as it were, the FX subsidy, the petroleum subsidy, and so on, was funded by debt. And some of that debt, we are still paying it, we are still servicing them till today. And because now, were those even productive debt? No. And when you check what has happened to Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio over the past 13, 14 years, you find something striking. Compared to other countries, our debt has risen much faster than our GDP, meaning that our debt was less productive. And how productive can the debt be when it was funding welfare, as it were? Now the welfare is even a format that benefited the rich more than the poor.
So you say, I guess in conclusion, we're on the path to production.
We're on the path to production, and
we don't know the exact time lag that we should expect moving the macro benefits to the micro.
Let me say, we have a good part of the micro benefit already manifesting. For example, anyone who has an RSA, a retirement savings account, you will have noticed some growth in your PFA, in your RSA account balances in the past 3 years. The money has been, the value of the funds has been jumping. Why? Because the equity market is growing up. So any Nigerian who has a pension fund is already benefiting at that level. Another area is state governments are no longer owing salaries like they used to. Yes.
Because I wanted to say,
I know what that means.
Still owing.
No, they are no longer owing.
Like they used to.
No, they are not owing at all.
Totally.
State governments are no longer owing salaries.
Oh, wow.
Because they have the revenues. So instead of sharing the revenue in the form of PMS subsidies, FX subsidies,
we know FAC has increased.
Yes, FAC has increased. For some states, it has quadrupled. So now this is it. When government owes salaries, what happens? At different levels, local, state, or federal, demand in the market is weak. The market women suffer. Then what does that mean for factories? Production slows down because there is higher inventory. Nobody is buying what you have produced. So there is strong spillover effect of that. We also don't have field queues anymore like we used to. Then when you look at ASU strike, the universities have been running smooth. In fact, in the past 3 years, we've had 0 days of ASU strike. That's unprecedented in perhaps 4 decades.
So we are on our way?
Yes, we are on our way, but we can't expect that trickle down will happen simply from government revenue down to the household. Except for the most vulnerable households, for whom government has a welfare intervention program. Outside of that, production must grow, and people will prosper to the extent that they are involved or they participate in productive activity, either as investors or as workers or as a member of the value chain.
Well, be part of the productive.
They have to be part of it.
All right, thank you so much for coming on, Mr. David Adeoye, the Director of Quarters Economics. Thank you
for
sharing that picture with us.
Thank you.